Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 81, Friend and Foe Alike. The episode begins with Ash and the gang in their cabin, and Ash looking out the window depressed as fuck at the fact that he had to face Richie in his upcoming battle. Truly a shitty situation indeed, but Ash's tough thoughts are soon interrupted by Misty calling him over to the computer that her and Brock are currently on, and she proceeds to show him a whole bunch of stats regarding Richie in the Pokemon League. It points out how in all 4 of his battles, he has only used his Butterfree, Pikachu, and Charmander, and none of his Pokemon have lost any of their battles, meaning that Richie had won all of his battles 3-0. Ash is shocked at this, but he maintains his confidence, even though Brock and Misty both have severe warnings for him, with Brock warning him that this would probably be his toughest battle yet, and Misty warning him that Richie used the same type of Pokemon that he did, being Flying, Fire, and Electric, explaining how that would make the battle harder, as Ash wouldn't be able to rely on type matchups. As I said though, Ash maintains his confidence despite these warnings, perhaps a little too much, having that overconfidence that everyone's warned him about. Meanwhile, after last episode's events, Richie was just getting his Pokeballs back from Nurse Joy after he had sent them to get healed. Ash was coincidentally about to do the same thing, so the two rivals met up with each other. They were initially a little on edge, each of them nervous about having to battle one another due to their friendship, but they eventually broke the ice as they shook hands and promised to make their battle the most entertaining one yet. Richie then leaves so that Ash can get his Pokemon, and Nurse Joy, having overheard Richie and Ash's conversation, informs Ash that him having to battle a friend was actually a good thing, as it meant that he could be happy no matter which one of them won. Meanwhile, Team Rocket was eavesdropping on Nurse Joy and Ash's conversation, with Jessie commenting how someone like Ash was just lucky to have any friends, period, confirming the fact that she didn't growing up. She questions why no one would want to be friends with someone as awesome as her, leading James to simply reply it was because she was a bitch, which gets him absolutely shit-slapped, with Jessie's fan. Team Rocket then get the idea to use Ash and Richie's friendship to their advantage for their next plan to steal Pikachu. This plan started with a simple phone call, as Ash's phone in the cabin rang, with Misty picking it up. It appeared to be Richie on the other side, and as soon as Misty picked up, he demanded Ash and insulted Misty in the process, which pissed her off so much that she swiftly handed Ash the phone, almost hitting him in the face in the process, angrily informing him that Richie had called for him. Why would Richie be rude to Misty though, you may ask? Well, it's because it wasn't actually Richie talking, but Jessie with a voice changer. Their plan was essentially to lure Ash out into the woods, thinking that Richie wanted to see him, and then catch him off guard and steal his Pikachu. So, Team Rocket began to do just that, with the first step being to lure Ash. So, in Richie's voice, Jessie requested that he wanted to see Pikachu and tell him something, so Ash should bring him out into the woods. This makes Ash curious as to what it was, so he foolishly decides to go along, not knowing that it was in fact Team Rocket. Brock and Misty are also obviously unaware, with Brock simply warning Ash to not be long, as he could miss his match, when he should really be warning him not to be so goddamn gullible. Anyways, Ash heads out to the woods, where he thinks he spots Richie, but in reality, this Richie who he begins talking to is nothing but a cardboard cutout. Unfortunately, Ash only realizes this when it's too late, as Team Rocket then unveil themselves and drop a net down on him, capturing him. Team Rocket immediately start doing their motto, taunting Ash that he was captured, as they congratulate each other on the sheer fact that they were able to do so. But Ash just cuts them off, explaining that he really needed to get out, otherwise he could miss his match at the league. Team Rocket obviously don't listen though, even as Ash continues to thrash and thrash around the net, just fucking trying his absolute darndest to get out. But they instead of letting him out, throw him in the back of a new van that they had built, and begin driving away. Was a van gonna be their new vehicle now as opposed to a Gyarados sub? Meanwhile, back at the cabin, Brock was getting pissed off that Ash seemingly hadn't paid attention to his warning to be back on time for his match, as that time was very fast approaching, and Ash still hadn't returned yet. Misty suggested that maybe Ash had already went to the stadium without them, but Brock had his doubts. Meanwhile, Ash was fully aware of the time crunch he was on, so once he was thrown into the truck, he wasted no time in attempting to escape, doing so by sending out his Squirtle and having him flood the truck. While this may seem like a stupid idea, you have to remember that Squirtle could also double as a flotation device for Ash, so he was really at no risk here. Team Rocket, on the other hand, they could drown if the thing flooded, so once they saw all the water flood into the driving compartment, they immediately panicked. Especially Meowth, being a cat who hated water, so he jumped up in fear, trying to go into James's arms, but blocking his view in the process, meaning he couldn't see where he was going as he was driving, so that resulted in a crash into a nearby guardrail. With Team Rocket severely injured from the crash, Ash takes the opportunity to escape with Pikachu and make his way to the stadium. Unfortunately though, Team Rocket recover from their injuries very fast, and proceed to catch up to Ash after only a few minutes by riding on a pair of wheels from the destroyed truck, almost like a unicycle. Ash doesn't panic though, as he notices how they were driving it very terribly. I mean, understandably, it's hard to fucking drive just wheels of a truck as a unicycle, but all Ash has to do is dodge out of their way, and they end up crashing into another guardrail, knocking themselves out this time. Ash then makes sure that they stay down this time by unleashing his Bulbasaur and having it use Vine Whip on them, and then having his Pikachu use Thundershock, just to add a little bit of extra injury to it. Ash believes he's finally free from Team Rocket's tormenting as he continues on to the stadium once again, but Team Rocket are once again back. Oh my god, this is getting old. This time, they were riding bikes, and James orders his Weezing to use Smog so that it blinds Ash. James then threatens him that they wouldn't leave him alone until they gave him Pikachu, even if it meant that he had to miss his match, and they were not kidding, because they just kept coming back. Being reminded of his match when James mentioned it, this causes Ash to zone out for a second, thinking of the promise that he made with Richie earlier about making it their best match ever. Seeing that Ash was a bit distracted, Team Rocket take the opportunity to jump off of their bikes and try and snipe Pikachu from Ash, especially because he still could barely see in the smoke, so it'd be even easier to catch him off guard. However, when Ash sees that the bikes are unoccupied, he quickly runs to them before Team Rocket gets to him and gets on the bikes, riding them away. Team Rocket angrily questioned how the fuck he was able to steal the bikes, despite how he shouldn't have been able to see with all the smoke, and Ash simply replies that he wasn't stealing the bike, but borrowing it, much like he did to Misty when he stole her bike, and it resulted in it being destroyed. So I'd say it's pretty safe to say that these bikes won't be making it past this episode. Ash better hope that bike doesn't get destroyed, as he was going to need it to get to the match on time, as Richie had already arrived at the stadium, and all of the crowd was eagerly anticipating Ash to show up as well, since the battle was set to begin in any minute. And if Ash didn't make it in time, he would be disqualified, thus giving Richie the win by default. This made Ash's mom panic in the crowd, and Professor Oak tried his absolute best to calm her, stating that Ash always got out of trouble, because he had a thing called plot armor. Just then, Misty, who had arrived at the stadium, walks up to Richie and accuses him of meeting Ash in the woods and trying to scare him off of the battle so that he could win by default, and that basically Richie had orchestrated this whole thing. Richie questions why he would do something like this, and Misty answers with the fact that it was simply because he was a rude bitch, referencing what she thought he had said to her on the phone earlier. As Misty restated what she thought Richie had said, Richie explains that it wasn't actually him on the other end of that phone, as he didn't remember saying anything like that. Misty surprisingly but correctly believes him right away, and it realizes that must mean that something must have happened to Ash if he was this late, because if Richie didn't interfere, what else could have happened? And really, she should have assumed that Team Rocket was at fault. Speaking of Team Rocket, even after Ash biked away from the cloud of smoke, Team Rocket was still following him, this time in their Meowth balloon with a claw attached to it. They proceeded to use this claw to grab Ash's bike and pull him up with it, making him attached to the Meowth balloon. Okay, but the important thing, was the bike destroyed though? Well, we don't get an answer. All we know is that as soon as Ash was pulled up by the claw, he immediately sent out his Pidgeotto and had his Pikachu jump on it. Pidgeotto flew Pikachu up, and Pikachu proceeded to use a Thundershock, which destroyed the basket of the balloon, sending Team Rocket dropping down onto the ground, and leaving Ash still dangling to the actual balloon part in his bike, thanks to the claw. With only the frame of the basket remaining after Pikachu's Thundershock, this causes the balloon to begin plummeting down as it has no extra weight to hold it up, but thankfully, Pidgeotto is able to grab the frame of the basket and begin pulling it along, and Ash orders it to take them to the stadium before it was too late. Unfortunately though, it may have already been too late, as the announcer had come up to Richie at this point to inform him that it was in fact time for the winner to be decided, as Ash had been disqualified, adding that they couldn't allow to give Ash any more time as the audience was getting impatient, and the league didn't want to risk upsetting its audience. Richie, however, refused to take a default win, stating how lame that was, and assuring the referee that Ash had promised that he would be there, as they had promised to have the greatest battle of all time. He then further stated that he was sure that Ash had a very good reason for not showing up, and that if they were worried about the crowd being displeased, then they should just wait for Ash, because they were going to give them a battle that they would really appreciate, even if it took a little long for Ash to get there. Richie's immense pleading and adamancy that Ash would arrive were thankfully enough to convince the referee to give Ash just 10 more minutes to show up. The countdown was on. Brock, Misty, Oak, and Ash's mom all sighed a collective sigh of relief at how nice Richie was, stating that without Richie's kindness, then Ash would have been utterly crushed and disqualified. The sighs of relief don't last for long though, as the 10 minutes quickly disappears and Ash had still yet to show up to the stadium. The referee then comes up to Richie once again and says that he really couldn't give them any more time anymore, and officially declared Richie the winner. But just then, at the very last second, Pidgeotto showed up carrying the balloon. It then landed in the stadium as Ash jumped out of the balloon and immediately ran up to Richie, apologizing to him for almost breaking their promise, while also giving quick apologies to the league officials and the crowd as well, so that they wouldn't be too mad at him. He had one more apology to give out though, which was to his Pidgeotto, which was utterly tired out after having to speed with an entire balloon on its back. I mean, it was so tired that it almost crashed into the stadium. Ash thanked it for doing its best, and said that as a reward, he wouldn't make him fight in this battle, and recalled him into his Pokeball so he could rest. Anyways, Richie was certainly right about Ash and his battle, immediately hyping up the crowd and taking away any displeasure they had, as that's certainly what it did, especially to Ash's mom, who was cheering so loudly that she could be heard even above all of the numerous other cheers. This led Professor Oak to try and get her to calm down a little bit, as he was embarrassed. But anyways, Ash's mom proceeded to not quit cheering as the battle began. Officially, it was time for the first main match. Although despite Professor Oak previously claiming that the main matches were full 6-on-6s, that was only for the top 16 and above. We were still in the top 32, so the battle was 3-on-3. Ash sent out his first Pokemon, being his Squirtle, and Richie sent out his first Pokemon, being his Happy, aka his Butterfree. After each Pokemon gets off a successful tackle, Butterfree then instantly ends the battle by using a sleep powder to put Squirtle asleep. This renders him unable to battle, so Ash has to send in his second Pokemon. He thinks about which one to use, as he knew that he couldn't use Pikachu due to him being too tired out from having to deal with Team Rocket. But Pikachu immediately proves him wrong, as he steps onto the stadium, wanting a chance to battle. Ash is shocked and worries if Pikachu will be able to handle himself due to already being super tired, but he doesn't deny him his want to battle, as he sends him out as his second Pokemon, and he proceeds to immediately tackle the Butterfree, instead of doing some dodging first to warm up like Ash had originally planned. Ash wasn't complaining about this different plan, of course, as Butterfree was now weakened. With it being too weak to attack, Butterfree instead tried to simply lift Pikachu up into the air, but when it did this, Pikachu just used a Thunder Shock, which shocked them both, but due to Pikachu being an electric type, its own electric attacks were ineffective against it, so the Butterfree was the only one injured, as the Butterfree fell to the ground, dropping Pikachu in the process and being knocked out, meaning that Pikachu had got the win. Let's go! Richie then sends out his second Pokemon, being his Charmander Zippo, and the Charmander proceeds to use several flamethrowers, but Pikachu manages to use agility to swiftly dodge them all. But unfortunately, the Charmander is able to use a tackle and finish Pikachu off, as it was already weakened. So one stray hit was all that was needed to take it down. Pikachu tried its absolute hardest to get back up, as it wanted to win just as much as Ash did, but it unfortunately wasn't able to, as it collapsed to the ground, much to Ash's sadness. Ash thought about who to use for his final Pokemon, when he realized that due to Muck, Tauros, and Kingler being at Oak's lab, he only had 2 available Pokemon left, as Pidgeotto was too injured, being Bulbasaur and Charizard. He knew that Bulbasaur wouldn't work well against Charmander due to him being a grass type, so Charizard was his best option, despite Charizard's constant disobedience. This disobedience made Ash instantly freeze up when he was going to go throw the Pokeball in utter nervousness for how things were going to go down, as he remembered all the individual times that Charizard has disobeyed him across the series. However, he knew that Charizard was really his sole savior, potentially, so he sent him out. Surprisingly, Charizard does unleash an attack, but it's only after Charmander made the first attack, which was a tiny little flamethrower, which Charizard just tilted its head to dodge, and then proceeded to get pissed off by, so he unleashed his own huge flamethrower and proceeded to chase Charmander with it, wanting to teach his little brother, quote-unquote, a lesson. Richie, being the kind trainer that he was, saw how much that Charmander was struggling to run away from the huge flamethrower, and didn't want to risk Charmander literally getting burnt to a crisp, so he decided to recall Charmander even though it had not lost yet, which effectively meant that Charmander was disqualified from the battle, and Richie had to choose his final Pokemon, which was none other than his Pikachu, Sparky. Ash began to get a little more confident in Charizard, because Charizard had managed to use a flamethrower, so maybe it would use more moves against Pikachu, right? Well, it certainly did, such as a Stomp, and then using its wings to blow Pikachu back. But after it saw how hard those attacks hit the Pikachu, and that he had almost knocked it out by that point, Charizard decided to take a nap and give up, laying right in the middle of the stadium, as Pikachu charged towards it before stopping in shock at what the fuck Charizard was doing. Pikachu wasn't the only one in shock, so was Ash, and he was angry too. I mean, he thought that Charizard was finally listening to him in his darkest hour of need, but nope, Charizard was back to its regular self. He pleaded with Charizard to get up, but Charizard listened absolutely terribly. As for everyone else's reaction to Charizard's disobedience, well, it was mostly just disbelief and anger. Richie was in fucking shock. He had never seen anything like this before. The audience was angry, as they wanted an exciting battle, and Ash's mom was a mixture of both. She was angry at Charizard and fucking sad for Ash, and in shock. She questioned Professor Oak beside her why Charizard was disobeying Ash when it had seemed to obey him in the beginning against the Charmander, and Oak clarified that Charizard was simply acting of its own will, not obeying Ash, and the reason why it attacked the Charmander, but not the Pikachu, was that the Charmander had pissed it off. So he saw it as a worthwhile opponent, but Pikachu hadn't really pissed him off, so he just saw it as a boring little Pokemon and didn't want to waste his time with it, especially after seeing how weak it was after testing out a few attacks. After waiting a few more seconds to see if Charizard would decide to do anything, the referee then declared that Charizard was unable to battle as it was refusing, therefore meaning that Ash had lost all 3 of his Pokemon, giving Richie the win. After all this, Ash had lost the Pokemon League. Ash fell to his knees in shame and despair as he recalled Charizard into his Pokeball, and Richie was a little concerned as he saw that Ash was very, very, very sad. But however, when Ash went up to Richie, Ash made sure to hide his sadness, not wanting to seem like a bad sport in front of him, and put on a brave face, thanking Richie for the battle, stating that it was awesome. And that part wasn't a lie. He did enjoy the battle, although he was majorly upset that he lost though. He then congratulates Richie, shakes his hand, and tells him that he better win his next battle in the tournament. For his sake. Richie promises he will, and the crowd reacts in pure happiness. They really appreciated having a friendship to latch onto. And I mean, as an audience of this show, so did I. Having an actual rival battle as the last battle was way better than having just random characters throughout the league, like Jeanette, for example, that we didn't even know. And yeah, I know we met Richie during the league, but we at least got to spend an episode with him before we had the battle. Anyways, though, the episode ends with Ash going to the now empty stadium late at night to watch the torch burn bright, to reignite his shattered spirit, which had been shattered due to the loss. Thankfully, seeing the flame made him a little bit happier, as he remarked that although he lost, he still learned a lot throughout all of his battles here. And thus ends the first Pokemon League arc of the anime. That's right, guys, the first, hint hint. I mean, I'm sure you know where the anime is going. If you're watching my summaries, chances are you've already seen the episodes. If my summaries are your only exposure to some of these episodes, then go and watch the episodes yourself. I mean, sure, you don't have to go watch the filler ones. You can gladly watch my recaps in place of those. That's partly why I'm doing this, because there's so many goddamn filler episodes, you can't be expected to watch them all. But like, for big ones like these, make sure you actually watch them if you can.